Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm lucky enough to get you for your very last session after what sounds like a very long day. Scott Peters is always a tough act to follow. Luckily, he was virtual this time, so that's like slightly easier. But I hope that was a good conversation. Scott has always been a really wonderful proponent of the business community here and thinking about the ways in which our strategic sectors make us more competitive internationally and also make us regionally more competitive. And we travel internationally with Congressman Peters every year. We're in Korea this year, and he's always been a really strong proponent of the binational opportunity here. And that's one of the stories that we tell most frequently when we are overseas looking at foreign investment opportunities. So I'm delighted to be here with you all today. What I was asked to do is essentially just close out the day with a little bit of insight on the regional economy and how that fits into some of the big macro trends we're seeing in the country right now and across the world. I think Cliff Notes version is San Diego continues to be a really great place to weather some of those changes and to think about creative solutions to a lot of challenges that the global economy continues to face. A little bit about who I am and where I come from. Every region has a regional economic development corporation. Our model is a little bit different in that we're primarily a private sector funded model. So we've been around a long time, about 56 years. About 80% of our budget comes from the biggest employers in the San Diego region. So your Qualcomms and Viasats, your Apples, et cetera, who invest in our organization to drive a broad-based economic development agenda. Our board is by definition really big, but it includes the presidents of all of our universities. It includes most of our major employers, all of our healthcare institutions, civic leaders, city, county, state, et cetera. And the goal is really to focus on the building blocks of any strong economy. First and foremost, job creation, and making sure that we're creating quality jobs in our most strategic sectors. Second, the talent that fuels those jobs, and increasingly talent is the currency of economic development. It used to be in my industry, in economic development, you talked a lot about incentives and cost and sort of these margins. And now the number one question we get all the time is, what does your talent pipeline look like? What is it going to look like in the future? Do you have the best and the brightest people, and are they trained to do the jobs that the future requires? And it's no surprise to anyone in this room that the binational story here is a really important puzzle piece in that overall talent story. And then finally, thinking about the infrastructure the economy needs to thrive, right? Thriving households, affordability, transit, all of these things. So like I said, we're primarily private sector funded. We are not like a chamber with thousands of members. We have a small-ish group of about 200 curated investors that invest in a reasonably high level so that we can drive programming across the whole region. We try to lead initiatives that are demand-side driven, so really responsive to the actual needs of the economy, that are employer-led and employer-informed, and that are outcomes-based, so we can measure where we've been and whether we're making a difference. How many of you are from San Diego or Tijuana? Okay, so about half. I wasn't sure, so I wanted to spend just a little time centering us where we are. We talk a lot about our region as a binational mega region, as not necessarily an economy on an international border, but a large metropolitan region that's bifurcated by an international border. And a lot of the work that we do on both sides of this border is trying to figure out how to make it disappear for businesses, for families, for all of the positive things that go back and forth across the region. So that population is about 7 million, about half north of the border, about half south of the border, and a lot of mixing. Like if you look at San Diego Unified School District, 1 in 5 students has gone to school in Tijuana, and about the same number if you look at public schools in Tijuana. So the talent pool is binational, bicultural, bilingual, et cetera, and that's a huge competitive advantage. About a quarter of all San Diegans were born outside of the United States, and we are a really diverse place, majority minority, which is a competitive advantage as well. With a gross domestic product, that's only San Diego of about $270 billion. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is not just how to grow jobs, but what type of jobs and what drives growth. So we think a lot about what we call traded clusters. You may have heard Congressman Peters say this as well, that there are sort of 3 or 4, depending for him on the day, really big drivers of the regional economy. And we call them traded clusters because these are the things that bring resources into the region, right? Whether that's via sort of new capital because of new business formation, whether that's because of federal contracts, because we have a big commercial defense and military presence here, whether that's because of visitors coming here and spending their money. That we buy and sell all sorts of things and provide all sorts of services that bring capital and innovation into the region, and then that drives job creation throughout the rest of the economy. So in my organization at the regional EDC, we spend a lot of time thinking about what we call the innovation cluster, and how that drives job creation throughout the rest of the economy. So that cluster only makes up about 11% of jobs in this region. But for every job you create that's an innovation cluster job, that creates about 2.2 jobs throughout the rest of the economy. So as long as you're focused on those fundamentals, then in the local economy, whether it's healthcare, whether it's retail, whether it's trade and transportation and utilities, those jobs can grow as well when you focus on the growth drivers. So here in San Diego, those drivers are, as you all know, in a lot of forward-looking industries. So a lot of life sciences, both medical on the medical device side, as well as biomanufacturing, biopharma. A lot of technology, especially you got your SaaS companies, you got your wireless 5G companies. Also a lot of, I heard a lot of talk about AI, a lot of new innovation in AI, and San Diego has been an early adopter on the private sector side, and a lot of development and deployment, and then a huge commercial defense hub as well. And so there's a lot of convergence among these things, right? So we have really important core competencies in the commercial defense space around autonomous systems. That obviously is driving a lot of research and development around AI that then transfers across the entire economy. So a lot of really cool technological convergence happening there. And then what I'm going to do is just go through some general fundamental truths about the economy now and some overall long-term trends, and then close with a little bit of what's happening now, and then let you guys all out to find the bar or whatever it is that comes after this. So one important point, I know there's lots and lots in the press about increasing numbers of tech layoffs, about the up and down and volatility of employment. And I think one thing that's really, really important to contextualize all of that is that, and this is probably not surprising to the people in this room, but sort of the overall trend is towards scarcity in the United States. There is no place in this country that is training enough folks in the industries where most of the growth is occurring. So by and large, unless something really significant changes in terms of immigration policy, or we all start having a lot more kids, and for me, 2 is enough, that trend is not going to change. So the overall trend is that there are fewer and fewer available workers for each job. The cross-border economy is really, really important. And when you look at exports and imports, the important thing about this chart, if you could read it, is that you see a lot of the same things on both sides. A lot of the things that we export from San Diego are in the same clusters as the things we import. And the reason for that is that we have a really, really robust cross-border supply chain. So it's not trade, it's co-production, right? Things cross the border 2, 3, 4, 5 times before they go to their final destination. And that is, in terms of like the US-Mexico opportunity, that's really important for San Diego. Important to note is what's really driving a lot of this. If you could read those things, you would see that semiconductor technology is one of those things that's on both sides. I think that's the orange. Medical device goods is one of the others, and then electronics. And those are trends where you're seeing tons of, 2 things. One, a lot of upgrading. In terms of all the devices are connected devices now. You have a technological capability increase. And then 2, it's a lot of the big industries that are driving nearshoring trends. And you're seeing a lot of foreign investment and domestic investment in the cross-border region around those things. So But important to note is that for San Diego, because it is an innovation hub, goods trade only tells a tiny bit of the story. The real story is around services. You know, when you buy and sell cybersecurity services overseas, engineering services, research and development services, these are the things that drive the most value for the economy here. And it's also the place where you see the biggest growth in terms of our cross-border relationship as well. So when you think about huge IT clusters that are emerging in Baja and in Tijuana, that's driving a lot of the services trade and those key strategic clusters within San Diego. Not surprisingly, foreign investment is concentrated in those same sectors, life sciences and technology. This essentially just shows you the key markets and the investment presence in San Diego. It's broadly driven by mature markets and mergers and acquisitions. A lot of that in the life sciences. And if you can see across the bottom, a lot of your usual suspects: UK, Japan, France, China, which has has gone way up just in the last 5 years. It didn't even used to be top 10, but that has increased. And then also increasing is India, Korea, etc., which were not big partners before and increasingly are. So kind of as we think about these things, and as we look at the massive disruption caused by the pandemic that accelerated so many of the disruptions that were already happening in the economy, I think the key takeaway for a lot of us here is that the binational region is well positioned. Digital transformation has certainly accelerated for most companies by about 3 to 5 years. Supply chain disruption has kind of revealed for everyone the need for supply chains to be both efficient and resilient. And so after sort of efficiency being king for a decade or more, probably 2 decades now, you're now seeing a lot more regionalization of supply chains to serve regional markets. And for a broad region, meaning North America, that creates a lot of opportunities. The war for talent has intensified, and that will continue to intensify regardless of the kind of temporary ups and downs in the job market. And finally, the geopolitics of trade and investment remain really volatile, and that doesn't look like it will change when you look at the broad power dynamic between the U.S. and China, when you look at the increasingly sort of contested relationship around strategic technology especially. That's not going to get less complex. And what that means for a region like North America is that firms are looking at building redundancies, looking at building resiliencies, looking at ways to manage this more bifurcated world, which might not ultimately be in anyone's best interest, but it is the direction that we're going. So, and then added to all of that is this kind of what's essentially in the United States. Industrial policy has always been a bad word in America for a very long time. Now we have what is probably the single biggest investment. It is what I would call, as a scholar, industrial policy investment in more than a generation. And it's really focused on things that San Diego excels in when you look at the future economy. So it's essentially, an foreign policy disguised as a competitiveness agenda, disguised as a manufacturing investment. So when you think about the semiconductor chips and science stuff, San Diego is a clear front runner there. When you think about clean technologies and advanced battery technologies, there's a big research and development piece for San Diego there. We're also adjacent to Imperial County, which has the largest lithium deposit in all of North America. And tons of new policy pushes that are driving investment to build a domestic supply chain there. And then similarly, when you look at the regulatory environment in California and the really, really big shifts the state has made and is making towards clean infrastructure, that creates a lot of challenges for firms and communities. It also creates a lot of new commercial opportunities. And so being able to seize those opportunities will be really important in the years ahead. And our organization, these are the ways that we help with that in terms of providing services to firms. So I'm going to stop there. Questions and answers. Okay, for Q&A. So
Are the research and development grants in San Diego, they used to be handed out through the MTech fund? Is that still being handled through the city, or is that being handled through your organization or others?
I believe there are no explicit research and development grants by the city anymore. There is an R&D tax credit that is still active at the state level, and we help a lot of firms access those funds. I believe the city's incentive program, though, does not have a carve-out for R&D now.
2 questions. One, do you have a slide with your contact information?
I don't know if this one does, but I'm happy to give you a card.
Okay. Awesome. And then the second is, with all of the kind of in-demand jobs that you're seeing, especially here in San Diego, are you seeing that more of them are skewed towards entry level, where you kind of have the resources to, get these individuals where they can be upskilled, or are you seeing that organizations are needing to import the talent here to, or versus locally grown?
It's a good question. For a long, long time, it was the latter. A lot of the push was around talent attraction to this region. And it's become increasingly clear that that's not a winning strategy, because you're just stealing talent from other places that also don't have enough. And that's a really expensive way, and ultimately not a very great way to do talent acquisition. So you're seeing a lot I'm going to answer your question in 2 ways. In terms of the jobs that are open now, it's pretty evenly split across experience level. So when you, and I say even, if you look at entry level, 1 to 3 years, middle manager, and senior level, that's all pretty even. In general, everybody, probably all of us too, would rather hire somebody who already knows all the things we need them to know to be successful. But as that gets more difficult, you're seeing a lot of new investment in talent pipeline initiatives and in trainee programs and apprenticeships, and trying to look at the talent pipeline in the same way you might look at your supply chain, right? Like, how do you build resiliency? How do you train people over the long term? How do you play the long game, even while you are obviously needing to fill chairs now? So there's a lot of new investment in more kind of talent pipeline strategies and growing the talent that you need.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Hi. It seems like a lot of the federal policy of moving manufacturing kind of away from China. Mexico is the big net gain there for manufacturing. Do you do a significant amount of like hardware tours of taking companies down and finding partners in Mexico who may be headquartered in San Diego?
We do. And we do a lot of cross-border project work, both on the technology side as well as the manufacturing side. A lot in the medical device space, some in energy and technology, and then a lot of like software projects too, with partners in Tijuana. So yes, like the nearshoring thing is real, and also it was already happening. And I think this is a really important point. I mean, I remember when I finished my PhD more than 10 years ago, talking about the regionalization of supply chains, the 90 million at that time Chinese manufacturing jobs that were going elsewhere, driven by industrial policy in China, right? So you've had this shift because the calculus has changed, markets have changed, where consumers have changed. And so you've had the opportunity for a long time. What COVID did and what kind of the U.S.-China trade war did was accelerate that a little more. So, but yes, we do. We run what we call Tijuana Tech Tours to look at some of the company software development centers that have emerged in Tijuana. And then we also do manufacturing tours. We work on individual company basis. And then we also do kind of tours for groups too. Thanks.